In the 12th episode of Luke Cage, Power Man meets Method Man, and Luke Cage prepares for his final battle against a pimp stormtrooper. Does anybody else want to go out and go get a brand new hoodie and just put some bullet holes in it? This week's episode of Luke Cage was awesome. It was a great build-up to the finale, and if the end of this week's episode is any indication, the final episode of Luke Cage is going to wholly embrace all of that ridiculous comic book cheesiness that we expect from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I can understand why a lot of people would be turned off by that, especially considering that a lot of the Marvel Netflix series are grounded a little bit more in realism. But if we got Daredevil in his costume and we got the Punisher showing up, we've got to see some ridiculous comic book action. And it looks like Diamondback is going to be bringing all of that in the next episode when he dons this ridiculously awesome looking power suit, which is actually slightly reminiscent of his costume from the comics. But he's got this helmet, he's got these weird crazy gauntlets on, which make him just as powerful as Luke Cage, not to mention he's completely bulletproof. Although that's not going to stop anyone from simply shooting him in the face. The main story of this week's episode immediately follows the end of last week's, where Luke Cage was arrested by the police, and only about 5 minutes into this one, he escapes from the police, and there's a great scene where he's stopped by this one cop who completely has him. He has him by the balls, but he decides to trust Luke Cage. He knows that there's some shady shit going on, and Luke is the only one with the power to take care of it, so he reluctantly lets him go. This is the beginning of Harlem finally starting to trust Luke Cage, and what I think is probably one of the strongest scenes from the entire series is where Luke Cage sees this store which is about to be robbed by these two goons. He walks inside, he takes these guys out, and it just so happens that one of the people in this store is Method Man himself. And they're both huge fans of each other, which is what I think is the greatest thing. Luke Cage loves Method Man loves Luke Cage, and Method Man decides to throw him a bone. They actually end up switching hoodies, because it's gonna look a little weird when you constantly see a guy who's bulletproof with like hoodies with holes in it. Everybody's gonna think of this Luke Cage. So basically this is his camouflage. And it just so happens that the hoodie is camouflage, so it's really cool. And what I love about this scene is that Luke Cage is just excited to get a hoodie from Method Man, but then again, Method Man is incredibly excited to have the hoodie that was worn by the legendary and mythical hero of Harlem, Luke Cage. It's a really great scene. It's made even better by the fact that it's followed by this montage sequence where you get to see Method Man hanging out with Heather B and Sway, and they're talking about the legend of Luke Cage. And all of these people in Harlem start to dress up just like Luke Cage to throw off the police. They're wearing all of these hoodies with bullet holes in them. And I think it goes without saying that just that imagery and a lot of the things that are said in this episode are incredibly relevant with the things that are going on in the world today. I don't like to get super political in my reviews or anything, but I have to say, I loved that one thing that Method Man said. He said, there's something powerful about seeing a black man who's bulletproof and unafraid. I'm a firm believer in that storytelling doesn't always have to be relevant, it simply just needs to tell a good story, but sometimes it can work, and in this sense, I think it does work. Not only are we getting a brand new take on Luke Cage, but it's actually reflective of the real world today, and it's not too ham-fisted about it. Not to mention, there's just something really cool about the camaraderie of Harlem, who in and of themselves are like the biggest characters in the entire series. Just the background characters themselves, the actual city. And you really get to see that come to life in this episode. But right after this, shit just starts getting crazy. Shades manages to get out of jail. He manages to get into the head of the inspector a little bit when he's about to give away who it is that's behind everything, and he just says, lawyer. That was a really funny scene. And he still manages to get out, and it looks like he's actually going to be killed by some of Diamondback's goons, including Zip. There's a great scene where he tries to choke him in this elevator, and it goes on for way too long, and he completely ends up just botching it when Shades ends up stealing a gun and executes all three of these guys. He meets up with Mariah, and that's when they realize the only way to deal with Diamondback and to get rid of him is to send Luke Cage after him, but they're going to have to get some sort of leverage, and they actually have all of the information about Luke Cage's past, which is incredibly convenient, of course, that it's all there, just perfect in files, but it looks like Luke Cage is going to be okay with this. It's kind of reluctant that he has to go about this way because he wants to get both Shades and Mariah in jail as well, but it's sort of the lesser of two evils. Not to mention, Diamondback has become really evil and made a lot of enemies. He's actually attacked by Domingo and his crew in this episode. They decide now is the time to strike against him, and they try to take him out in this big scene where they go to his warehouse, and there's a huge shootout that ensues. But this is just the excuse for Diamondback to reveal his secret weapon, which is this power suit which was developed by Hammer Industries, which has this crazy looking helmet. He has those gauntlets that he used in the previous episodes, and like I said, his actual costume is reminiscent of the one that he wears in the comics, with his undershirt actually looking like a snake's belly. There's also a whole nother subplot about Misty Knight teaming up with that woman by the name of Candace that we've seen in the last couple of episodes, who's bribed by Mariah, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and you're going to completely forget about that when you see Diamondback's ridiculous costume at the end of this episode, which to me personally gets me really excited. I cannot wait to watch the last episode now. So what's the rundown on this episode of Luke Cage? This one was one of my favorites, and what I really loved about it is that it felt more like kind of the first couple episodes of the series, which was just seeing Luke Cage in the world that he lives in, which honestly is really interesting to watch. All of the background characters in the series are pretty damn awesome. I'm glad we even got to see the return of Bobby in this episode. He's the one who delivered that great line about Diamondback actually being a pimp stormtrooper. You can tell that he's completely fed up with the fact that Pops' barbershop just keeps completely getting destroyed. Although, just the build-up to the next episode, I think, is one of the greatest things, especially the way it ended, when you get to see Diamondback in all of his glory, wearing that ridiculous costume. But you know what? It had to happen eventually. We were going to start seeing some costumed heroes. I mean, this does take place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, after all, and it just makes me love the character of Diamondback even more. I know that a lot of people don't like Diamondback. I've heard a lot of people say that he's like one of the worst elements of Luke Cage, because he just sort of comes out of nowhere. He has no rhyme or reason for being insane. But you know what? Sometimes you need a villain like this, and this is still just the first season of Luke Cage. This is just establishment, just getting to see how Luke Cage learns how to develop his powers and what he should learn how to do with them. And this is what this whole arc is going to be all about, is him just kicking Diamondback's ass and beginning the next phase of his journey. So this was a great episode of Luke Cage. I thought it was really fantastic. It had some great action scenes, a great music montage, thanks of course to Method Man, and just a lot of great visual imagery that is relevant to the things going on today and still manages to be a super exciting superhero show. So there it is. That's my thoughts on this episode right here. I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 5. I had no complaints about it. I was just really gelling the entire time and just loving this episode, and I cannot wait to watch the last one. So that's my thoughts. But before you guys leave, make sure to tell me what you guys thought about the 12th episode of Luke Cage in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching this review. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment or two, and maybe even like it if you would like to. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.